It's 6:47 a.m. Jake wakes up to an alarm he now physically hates. He shuffles into the kitchen, makes coffee at home because coffee shop coffee is for people with trust funds, and starts the internal math that has become his new morning meditation. Gas tank is low. That's $60. Lunch has to be packed because $14 for a sandwich is a war crime. Car insurance is due Friday. Rent hit his account Monday and he felt it in his spine. Jake gets in his 2014 Honda, drives 38 minutes in traffic to a job he doesn't love, for a salary that barely covers the life he needs to get to that job in the first place. And somewhere in the middle of that commute, he has the thought. He does not go to work to live anymore. He goes to work to afford going to work. This video is about why that is not in his head. It is actually happening, and it is happening to almost everyone. The average American household spends about $6,545 a month on basic living expenses. That is $78,540 a year, just to exist, just to keep the lights on and eat food and own a car that starts. Meanwhile, the median personal income in the US is about $35,805. Let that sink in. The average person makes less than half of what the average household spends, which means for most people to even touch average, two people have to be working. Both exhausted, both commuting, both sacrificing a meaningful chunk of their lives to subsidize a system that calls this normal. Housing eats 33% of the average budget. Transportation, another 17%. Food, another 13%. Healthcare, another 8%. Before you've saved a single dollar, had a single moment of fun, or done anything that resembles a life, you have spent roughly 70% of your income just on the infrastructure of existing. The remaining 30% is where all the content about financial literacy lives. The advice industry wants you to optimize that 30%. Skip the lattes, cancel the subscriptions, meal prep. Great, you saved $40 a month. Meanwhile, your rent went up $200 this year, and your grocery bill went up $120. Congratulations on the latte. The problem is not your spending. The problem is the math is rigged before you wake up. Let's talk about the scam that is commuting. The average American spends $6,700 a year just to get to and from their job. That is over $550 a month, gone, on the privilege of being allowed to earn a paycheck. Gas, insurance, car payment, maintenance, parking, tolls, all of it, paid out of your own pocket, to reach the building where you are paid less than the building generates. Then once you're in the building, you pay for lunch because the closest thing in the office kitchen is a communal coffee machine that hasn't been descaled since 2019. You pay for work clothes. You pay for childcare so you can go earn the money that pays for the childcare. For a lot of American families, the second parent's entire salary goes to childcare, which means they are working 40 hours a week to financially break even. In some cases, they are losing money. We have built an entire economy where the act of earning money has its own expense category, where the cost of labor is pushed off the employer and onto the worker. You are not paid to work. You are paid to work, minus the cost of being able to work. And nobody says that part out loud. Let's talk about the federal minimum wage, because this one is almost too stupid to be real. The federal minimum wage in the United States, as of 2026, is $7.25 an hour. It has been $7.25 an hour since July 2009. That is 17 years, almost 2 decades, during which rent has more than doubled in most cities. Healthcare costs have exploded. Groceries have gone up around 25% since 2020 alone. And the cost of literally everything has climbed, but $7.25. Because Congress has decided that the lowest paid workers in America can just figure it out. If the minimum wage had just kept pace with inflation since 2009, it would be around $11.45 today. If it had kept pace with its actual historical peak in 1968, it would be over $15 an hour. In today's dollars, the 1968 minimum wage paid more than what most states' minimum wage pays in 2026. 58 years ago. We are objectively paying low-wage workers less now than we did in the Nixon administration. 20 states still use the federal $7.25 rate, which means a full-time worker in those states makes about $15,080 a year before taxes. The federal poverty line for a single person is over $15,000. The minimum wage in 20 states is literally poverty by legal definition. Meanwhile, corporations are out there publishing press releases bragging about their competitive $23 an hour wages. That's not generosity. That is what minimum wage should already be if the system had done its job for the last 17 years. They are not being charitable. They are paying you what you were already owed and taking a victory lap for it. Here is the part that really gets me. You pay federal income tax. You pay state income tax. You pay Social Security. You pay Medicare. You pay sales tax on basically every purchase. You pay gas tax when you fuel up to drive to the job where you earn the money they taxed twice already. You pay property tax through your rent. You pay vehicle registration. You pay tolls. If you add all of it up, the average American pays somewhere around 30% of their income in various taxes, which, in theory, should buy you something. Roads that don't have potholes big enough to have their own gravitational pull. A healthcare system that doesn't bankrupt you. Schools that can afford books. Public transit that works. Instead, a huge chunk of the federal budget goes to defense contractors, corporate subsidies, and bailouts for industries that crash the economy every 12 years and then get handed billions to try again. In 2008, the big banks crashed the global economy. The federal government gave them a $700 billion bailout. Same banks that had spent the previous decade writing loans they knew were going to fail. No executives went to jail. They got bonuses. Meanwhile, when regular people fall behind on rent, they get evicted. When regular people can't pay medical bills, they get sent to collections. When regular people can't afford groceries, they are told to stop buying avocado toast. The system is not broken. It is working exactly as designed, just not for you. Here is what makes all of this so hard to escape. It is not just that wages are too low or that costs are too high. Although both of those things are true, the deeper trap is that the whole system is designed to keep you just stable enough to keep showing up and just stressed enough to never be able to plan your way out. Can't afford to move to a cheaper city because you cannot afford the moving costs. Can't afford to switch jobs because you'd lose health insurance in the gap. Can't afford to go back to school because you cannot afford to stop working. Can't afford to start a business because you cannot afford the runway. Can't afford to save because there is nothing left after the commute to the job that pays you enough to afford the commute. And every time something unexpected happens, a car repair, a medical bill, a broken tooth, whatever fragile progress you made gets wiped out. The average American cannot cover a $500 emergency without going into debt. That is not a personal failing. That is a policy outcome. The kicker is that when anyone names this out loud, the response from the comfortable is always the same. Get a better job, move somewhere cheaper, budget better. As if every single person in America has not already tried all three of those, while the people giving that advice inherited their house and cannot remember the last time they looked at a grocery receipt. So yeah, Jake goes to work to afford going to work. That is not a feeling. That is not dramatic. That is the actual structure of most American lives in 2026. The commute is expensive. The wages are stagnant. The taxes are high. The services they fund are bad. The minimum wage hasn't moved since the Obama administration, and the gap between what it costs to live and what labor pays keeps getting wider every year. The point of this video is not to make you feel worse. You probably already feel it. The point is to say clearly that what you are experiencing is real. It is not your fault, and it is not an accident. It is the outcome of decades of policy choices, corporate lobbying, and political inaction, and nothing about it will change until we stop pretending the problem is personal finance, when the actual problem is the arithmetic of the system. You are not bad with money. The money is bad. Subscribe if this channel is saying the stuff you have been thinking, but nobody else seems willing to say out loud.